Hello everyone. So it is time for us to move on to our new unit here in biology. So let's try and get that started, shall we? So today's video, we will briefly cover what we went over in class and what we will be going over in class tomorrow. So briefly, as a recap of today, let's get started with that. Okay, so today in class we went over the first part of Unit 3, DNA structure and replication, which is the basics of DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is a long molecule and it contains our genetic code. It's a very, very large biomolecule. Remember we talked about our 4 biomolecules at the beginning of the year. Nucleic acids was one of them. This specific nucleic acid is deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. Think of DNA like a recipe book on how to make one of you. And my DNA is how to make one of me. And my mom's puppy's DNA is how to make a clone of that puppy, okay? That is what your DNA is. It's the instructions on how to make you, you. Of course, we're not talking about personality or anything like that. We're just referring to physical appearance and actual structure of your cells and your organs, everything to be like an exact replica. So, our body has trillions and trillions of cells, right? And in those cells, except for our red blood cells, there is about 2 meters of DNA in the nucleus. I know, that's big, that's taller than me. So all of that information fits into those tiny, 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 tiny chromosomes. It is so tightly bound together that it becomes super tiny. But if you stretched it out, it would be about 2 meters tall. Just as a comparison, I'm about 1.8 meters tall. So yeah, it's taller than me. It's like 20 centimeters taller than me. So like this much? No, then bigger. A little bit less than a ruler. So yeah, fun stuff. Now, if you grabbed all the DNA in your body, you could stretch it from the earth to the sun and back 600 times. Not 6 times, 600. So that's one of the fun facts. We covered many more during class, so let's continue. Our DNA structure is in the shape of what we call a double helix. So what double helix means is that there's 2 strands that twist around each other, kind of like a ladder if you twisted it, okay? Now, the building blocks, again, we're talking about a nucleic acid, so our monomer is nucleotides. These nucleotides are made up of 3 groups, and we talked about this when we talked about nucleic acids. They are the phosphate group, the sugar molecule, and the nitrogenous base. Now, the phosphate group and the sugar molecule are going to be the same in every single step of the ladder. What's going to change is the nitrogenous bases, and that's what makes you, you, and not the exact same person as someone else, right? The instructions on how to make you are all in these little nitrogenous bases that hold the double helix together. So again, this is kind of what it looks like chemically drawn out. We have our phosphate group, our sugar, and our nitrogenous base. Okay? It's easy to tell which one's which, because the phosphate group has a P, the nitrogenous base has a bunch of N's, and your sugar is a little pentagon. Now remember, it's still going to have chomp, so carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. Those are still our elements. So back in Unit 1, again, we said nucleic acids were two kinds. We had DNA and RNA. And so we're going to look at the differences between them. If you just look at this picture, you'll be able to tell. And we also talked about it in class, so it should be fairly simple. Our DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA is just ribonucleic acid. So here, the difference is that deoxy portion, and that's just the different sugar. So DNA uses deoxyribose as the sugar, and RNA uses ribose as the sugar. So it's just a different sugar. That's the only difference, okay? And the nitrogenous base that we have for DNA, the 4 bases, in RNA, the only difference, remember from Unit 1, is that DNA has thymine, and RNA, instead of thymine, has uracil. So that's the only one that's different between these two. Adenine, guanine, and cytosine are in both RNA and DNA. Okay? Now, DNA is the one that holds the instructions on how to make each individual organism, whereas the RNA is the translator, basically, that shifts the instructions from the DNA to make the proteins that your body needs. So, between DNA and RNA, these are the two differences. The sugar in DNA is deoxyribose, and in RNA, it's ribose. So the only difference is that this one does not have one oxygen that is present in the other one. That's the only difference. That's why it goes from deoxy to no deoxy. And then the thymine is the one that we have as the base in DNA, and uracil is the base for RNA. And again, it's a very small difference. If you don't know chemistry, like advanced chemistry, it would be hard to tell these two pictures apart, right? But the main difference is this little connector right there. And don't worry, you don't have to worry about that unless you're going into like organic chemistry in college to become a doctor or something like that. So, again, DNA versus RNA. Physically, the main difference you can tell is that DNA is a double helix, RNA is a single strand. So it doesn't match up with the other one. So that's what we covered today in class. I'm going to go ahead and link you guys now to the video of what we will cover tomorrow. So just click on that annotation, or you can go back to the hub and click on it there. All right. I will see you guys then. Bye.